The great chamber floated in the darkness of space, far above the purple clouds of the Starprime. 12 platforms hung in a perfect circle, each one carrying the representative of a species that had conquered stars. Light from the distant sun painted long shadows across the polished floor. This was the Galactic Council, and today they would decide the fate of a small blue world called Earth. Ambassador Vorath stood on the Krellian platform, his gray skin stretched tight over a skull that was too large for his thin body. His eyes, black and without whites, scanned the other representatives with barely hidden contempt. The Krellians had built the first interstellar empire 10,000 years ago. They had crushed rebellions, absorbed civilizations, and shaped the laws that governed a 100,000 worlds. Vor believed his species had earned the right to lead. We have watched the humans for 30 years, Vorath said. His voice echoed through the chamber, translated instantly into 11 languages. We have studied their history, their technology, their expansion into nearby systems. The evidence is clear. They are a threat. On the platform across from him, the Visari delegate shifted uncomfortably. The Visari were tall and slender with skin that changed color based on their emotions. Right now, Ambassador Yen's skin was a troubled shade of gray. A threat, she asked. They have fewer than 20 colonies. Their fleet number is less than 200 ships. How can they threaten the council? Vorath smiled, though the expression looked wrong on his alien face. They come from a death world. Ambassador, their planet has extreme temperatures, violent weather, dangerous predators, and a gravity that would crush most species. Evolution made them into survivors. Killers. He pressed a button on his platform and images appeared in the center of the chamber. Look at their history. The images showed human wars, soldiers charging across muddy fields, cities burning, mushroom clouds rising over destroyed landscapes. Representatives watched in silence as centuries of human violence played out before them. They did this to each other. Vorath continued. Imagine what they will do to us when they are strong enough. They breed quickly. They adapt to any environment. They have already reverse-engineered technology from the probe we sent to observe them. In another century, they will rival any species in this chamber. Ambassador Krell of the Morvani Federation raised one of his for arms. The Morvani were a peaceful species, traders and diplomats, who had joined the council to avoid being conquered by it. We have sent diplomatic missions to Earth, Krell said. The humans welcomed us. They spoke of friendship, of trade, of joining the galactic community. Why would we attack a species that offers peace? Because their peace is a lie, Vor answered. Or perhaps they believe it today, but their nature will assert itself eventually. We have seen it happen before. Small species grow strong and then they grow hungry. Better to deal with the problem now while we still can. The debate continued for hours. Some representatives agreed with Vorath. The Denari had lost colonies to human expansion in disputed territory. The VAC collective distrusted any species that had developed nuclear weapons. Others were uncertain. The humans had done nothing aggressive, but their potential was frightening. Finally, the Visari called for a vote. Ambassador Yen stood on her platform, her skin now a deep blue of formal neutrality. The motion before the council is this: authorize a joint military action against the human home world of Earth. The goal will be complete submission of the human species. To council governance, those in favor. 9 platforms lit up with green light. The Krellians, the Denari, the Vatchin. 6 others voted yes, those opposed to. Platforms glowed red, the Morvani end. The small quiet Finari voted no. Abstentions. The Visari platform turned. Yellow, Ambassador Yen's skin shifted to. Match it, Thessor abstains, we are not. Convinced of the threat, but we will not stand in the way of the council's will. Vor and LT Unk and GT, thin lips spread into a wider smile. Then it is decided, the invasion. Fleet will assemble within 3 months. Earth will submit or be destroyed. The chamber erupted in discussion. Representatives argued about fleet contributions, command structures, and the division of human territories after the conquest. No one noticed the small drone that detached from the observation gallery and slipped away into space. No one knew that Earth had been listening all along. 3 months later, the invasion fleet gathered in the darkness between stars. 4,000 warships from 7 species formed a wall of metal and weapons that stretched across millions of kilometers. The Krellians contributed the largest force, eager to prove their dominance. The Denari sent their fastest attack craft. Even the Vatch, who rarely engaged in direct warfare, provided a 100 heavy cruisers. Admiral Voreth himself commanded the fleet from the bridge of the Krellian flagship Eternal Dominion. The ship was 5 km long, bristling with plasma cannons and missile tubes. It had destroyed rebellions and conquered worlds. Voreth had no doubt it would be enough. That the fleet jumped through folded space, emerging in the cold outer reaches of the Sol system. Neptune hung in the distance, a blue jewel against the black. Vor looked at the tactical display and felt satisfaction spread through his chest. No human ships in sight, no defensive platforms, nothing but empty space between his fleet and Earth. Send the ultimatum, Voreth ordered. The communications officer transmitted the standard message: surrender, disarm, submit to council governance. Resistance would result in the destruction of human cities one by one until compliance was achieved. It was the same message the council had sent to dozens of species over the millennia. Most surrendered immediately. Those who did not learn quickly that the council did not make empty threats. Response came faster than expected. Human woman appeared on the view screen. She wore a simple uniform, dark blue, with silver insignia. Her hair was gray, cut short. Her face showed lines of age, but her eyes were sharp and steady. Behind her, Voreth could see the bridge of a human warship. I am Admiral Chen, Way of the United Earth Defense Force, the woman said. Her voice was calm, almost gentle. You were not invited here. Leave now and we will forgive this. Stay and you will learn why we tried so hard to make peace. Vor laughed. The sound was harsh in the quiet bridge. Forgive us. You have 200 ships. We have 4,000. Your world has no orbital defenses. Your colonies are unprotected. You cannot stop us. Admiral Chen tilted her head slightly. We know exactly what we have. Ambassador, the question is whether you know what you face. She paused. This is your final warning. Turn back. Tell the council that humanity does not wish to be their enemy. We have worked very hard to avoid this moment. Please do not make us show you why. Your threats are meaningless. Voreth said. All ships. Advanced Tactical Formation Delta. We Will be in Earth orbit within 6 hours. The view screen went dark. Admiral Chen's face disappeared, replaced by the starfield in the distant sun. Vorath turned to his officers, who were already coordinating the fleet movement. Everything was proceeding perfectly. The humans were bluffing as primitive species always did. In a few hours, Earth would burn and the human threat would be ended forever. The fleet moved inward through the solar system. They passed Neptune, then Uranus, then the cold emptiness beyond Saturn. Scouts reported no enemy contacts. Long-range sensors showed the human fleet gathered near Earth exactly as intelligence had predicted. A few hundred ships protecting their home world. Brave, perhaps, but futile. Vor watched the tactical display with growing confidence. He had expected some resistance in the outer system, hidden mines perhaps, or a few ambush ships, but there was nothing. The humans were either more primitive than he thought, or they had already accepted their defeat. Admiral, the sensor officer said. His voice carried a note of confusion. I am detecting anomalies in the asteroid belt. Vor frowned. What kind of anomalies? Unknown. Some of the asteroids are showing unusual thermal signatures, very faint. But the officer never finished his sentence. Asteroid belt came alive. Across millions of kilom, rocks that had drifted for billions of years suddenly revealed their true nature. They were not rocks at all. They were weapons. Platforms built in secret and placed in orbit years ago, powered down and cold, invisible to any sensor. Thousands of them, and they were all firing at once. Vorath watched in horror as his tactical display turned red with destruction. Ships disappeared by the hundreds. The first volley killed 800 vessels in less than 2 minutes. Plasma bolts and kinetic rounds tore through shields and armor as if they were paper. Cruisers exploded. Carriers broke apart. Escape pods scattered like seeds in the wind. Evasive action. Vorath screamed. All ships scatter. Return fire. But returned fire at what? The weapons. Platforms were everywhere, and they were still activating. More and more of them powered up, adding their weapons to the slaughter. The fleet tried to flee, tried to find safety in numbers, but there was no safety. The humans had turned the asteroid belt into a killing ground. An officer shouted from across the bridge. Admiral, the jump points. They are blocked. Vor felt ice spread through his veins. Blocked how? Unknown technology, some kind of interference field. We cannot calculate jump coordinates. We are trapped in this system. The tactical display showed the truth. The survivors drifted in the darkness, their weapons cold and their shields lowered where for thousand warships had entered the Sol system. Barely 2,000 remained. The asteroid belt still glowed with the wreckage of the dead, a graveyard of metal and fire that stretched across the void. Admiral Vorath stood on the bridge of the Eternal Dominion, watching the tactical display update with new losses. Ships that had been too damaged to survive. Crews that had run out of air or power. His hands still trembled, though he tried to hide it from his officers. The greatest military force in galactic history had been cut in half by species that was not supposed to fight back. A young officer approached his platform. Admiral, the humans are transmitting new coordinates. They want us to move to a designated area near Jupiter. Vorath stared at the display. Jupiter was deeper in the system, closer to Earth, closer to the human fleet. They want us to walk into another trap. Sir, we have no choice. The jump points are still blocked. We cannot escape. Truth of those words burned in Vorath's chest. He had led his fleet into a cage. And now the humans held the key. Every option he considered ended the same way. Fight and die, surrender and live. There was nothing else. Order all ships to comply, Vorath said. Maintain defensive formation, no aggressive actions. The battered fleet began to move, ships that could barely fly limped toward Jupiter, their engines flickering and their hulls scarred. The Krellian flagship led the way, though its proud name now seemed like a cruel joke. There was no dominion here, only defeat. As they traveled, the humans made no further attacks. The weapons platforms went silent, though their targeting sensors remained active. Scout ships appeared on the edges of the fleet, small and fast, watching but not engaging. The humans were being careful. They were being patient. Vor understood why. The humans did not need to fight anymore. They had already won. Every clear's throat hour that passed reminded the Council fleet of their helplessness. Every silent moment proved that humanity could destroy them at any time and was choosing not to. It was a display of power more effective than any battle. The journey to Jupiter took 8 hours. The gas giant grew larger on the view screens, its bands of color swirling in eternal storms. The designated area was a stable point near one of Jupiter's smaller moons, far from any human installation, a holding pen for prisoners. When the fleet arrived, they found the human warships waiting. Vorath had expected 100 vessels. Intelligence had been clear on that number, but what he saw made his blood run cold. 300 ships hung in perfect formation, and every single one of them was wrong. They were too fast, too agile. Their hulls gleamed with technology he did not recognize, and at the center of the formation sat a ship that dwarfed even the Eternal Dominion. "What is that?" whispered the censor officer. Vor had no answer. The human flagship was 10 km long, shaped like a blade, covered in weapons that his sensors could not identify. It radiated power like a small sun. Nothing in the Council's database matched it. Nothing in 10,000 years of galactic history came close. Admiral Chen's face appeared on the view screen. "Welcome to the designated holding area, Ambassador. Your ships will remain here until negotiations are complete. Any attempt to power weapons or shields will be met with immediate destruction. Any attempt to launch shuttles without authorization will be met with immediate destruction. You will be given food, water, and medical supplies. Your crews will not be harmed as long as they follow these rules." Vorath found his voice. "What do you want from us right now?" "Nothing. You will wait here while your governments are contacted. The Council will be given a choice, just as you were given a choice in the asteroid belt. We hope they make a wiser decision than your fleet did." The transmission ended. Vorath sank into his command chair, exhaustion washing over him. Around him, his officers worked in silence, none of them willing to meet his eyes. They had followed him into disaster. They had trusted his confidence, his certainty that humanity would crumble. Now they floated in enemy space, surrounded by ships that could kill them at any moment. Hours passed, then days. The human ships maintained their positions, never approaching but never leaving. Supply shuttles arrived with food and medical kits delivered by small craft that carried no weapons. The humans who piloted them were polite Even friendly, they asked if anyone needed help. They offered to treat the wounded. They acted as if the battle had never happened. It was the kindness that broke some of the council officers. They had expected torture, execution, slavery. That was how conquered peoples were treated. That was how the council itself had treated defeated enemies for millennia. But the humans gave them blankets and bandages, asked about their dietary needs, and apologized for the limited menu options. Commander Eel of the Drari found herself crying in her quarters on the third day. She did not understand why her ship had survived the battle with minimal damage. Her crew was alive, but something about the human mercy cut deeper than any weapon. They had come to destroy Earth, and Earth was feeding them. On the flagship, Vorith received reports from across the fleet. Morale was collapsing. Officers argued about whether to attempt escape. Some crews talked about mutiny, others simply sat in silence, unable to process what had happened. The greatest military force in galactic history had been defeated, and their enemies were being nice to them. On the fifth day, the humans invited Vor to a meeting. A shuttle arrived at the Eternal Dominion's docking bay. Inside was a single human, a young officer with dark skin and a gentle smile. He introduced himself as Lieutenant Park and asked Vorith to accompany him to the human flagship. There would be no guards, no restraints, just a conversation. Vor considered refusing. He considered ordering his crew to capture the shuttle and use it as a bargaining chip, but he looked into Lieutenant Park's eyes and saw no fear. The human knew he was walking into the lair of his enemy. He did not care because he knew that Vor had no power here, and both of them understood it. The shuttle ride was quiet. Vor watched through the windows as they approached the massive human flagship. Up close it was even more terrifying. The hull was covered in patterns that seemed to shift and move. Technology so advanced it looked like magic. Weapons ports lined every surface. The single ship could probably destroy what remained of the council fleet without taking damage. They docked in a bay that was clean, efficient, and surprisingly empty. A few technicians worked on equipment. A handful of soldiers stood at attention, but there was no show of force, no display of power. The humans did not need to prove their strength. They had already proven it. Lieutenant Park led Vora through corridors that hummed with energy. Crew members passed them, nodding politely, going about their duties. Some of them smiled at Voreth, smiled at the Admiral, who had come to destroy their world. Finally, they reached a conference room. The door opened, and Admiral Chenwa stood to greet him. She was smaller than Voreth expected. Humans were generally shorter than Krellians, but Chen seemed especially slight. Her gray hair was cut close to her head. Her uniform was simple, without medals or decorations. She looked like someone's grandmother, not the commander of the most powerful fleet in the galaxy, Ambassador Voreth. She said, extending her hand in the human greeting, "Thank you for coming. Please sit down." Vor hesitated, then took her hand. Her grip was firm but not aggressive. He sat in the offered chair, and she sat across from him. Between them was a table with 2 cups of some steaming liquid. Tea, Chen explained. Human drink. It helps with difficult conversations. What do you want? Voreth asked. His voice was harsher than he intended. Chen took a sip of her tea. I want to understand, why did the Council vote to invade Earth, we sent. Peace missions, we offered trade, we. Asked only to be left alone, what did we? Do to deserve this, you exist, Vor said. You are dangerous, your species is. Aggressive, violent, unpredictable. The Council decided it was better to eliminate the threat now than wait until you were stronger. Chin set down her cup, so it was fear. You were afraid of what we might become, yes, and you still believe we are a threat, Vorith laughed. Though there was no humor in it, I believe you are the greatest threat the galaxy has ever known. You destroyed half my fleet in an hour. You have technology we cannot understand. If you wanted to conquer the Council, we could not stop you. Chen nodded slowly. You are correct. We could conquer the Council. We have been preparing for 30 years. Our weapons are better. Our ships are faster. We have studied every species in the galaxy and planned for every scenario. She paused. But we will not do it. Why not? We attacked you. We came to enslave your people. Any rational species would demand revenge. Chen looked at him with something that might have been pity. Let me show you something, Ambassador. She pressed a button on the table and a hologram appeared between them. It showed a planet burning, cities in ruins, bodies in the streets. Vorith recognized the signs of war, though the technology was primitive. This is Earth, Chen said. 200 years ago, we called it World War II. Billions of people died. Entire continents were poisoned with radiation. We almost destroyed ourselves. The images changed. Slow recovery, cities being rebuilt, forests growing back, children playing in parks where bombs had once fallen. We learned from the news of the defeat spread across the galaxy like wildfire, faster than light. Communication carried the story from system to system, world to world. The greatest military force ever assembled had been destroyed by a species that should have been easy prey. Humanity had revealed itself as something far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. On the Sar Prime, Ambassador Yin watched the reports with her skin shifting through shades of sick green. She had abstained from the invasion vote. She had not believed the humans were a threat, but she had lacked the courage to vote against her fellow council members. Now 2,000 ships drifted near Jupiter, their crews dependent on mercy. They are treating the prisoners well, her aide reported. Medical care, food, communication with families, no torture, no executions. Yen's skin flickered to confused purple. That makes no sense. Why would they show kindness to invaders? Unknown Ambassador. Perhaps it is a strategy to make us look weak. But Yen was not sure. She had spent decades studying alien species. She knew the patterns of conquest and revenge. This was something different, something that did not fit any model she understood. On the Krellian home world, the reaction was different. The ruling council met in emergency session. Their gray faces twisted with rage and fear. Admiral Voroth's fleet had been the pride of the Dominion. Its destruction was an insult that demanded response. We must send another fleet, declared High Commander Trell. A larger force. Enough ships to overwhelm their defenses. With what ships? Asked another commander. We committed 60% of our military to this invasion. Building a new fleet will take years. Then we take years. Humanity must be punished. But the voices of caution grew louder as the hours passed. Reports came in describing the human weapons, the speed of their Ships, the technology that seemed beyond anything the Dominion possessed. Some commanders began to ask uncomfortable questions. If the humans had hidden this much strength, what else were they hiding? What would happen if the next invasion failed too? On the Morvani Federation worlds, the mood was different still. Ambassador Krellel had voted against the invasion. He had argued that humanity deserved a chance at peace. Now he watched the aftermath with grim satisfaction and deep worry. They were right to prepare, he told his council. The humans knew we would come for them someday. They knew our promises of peace were fragile, and yet they still offered friendship first. What do you suggest? Asked the council member. I suggest we reach out to Earth directly. Without the council, if the Krellians want revenge, let them pursue it alone. The Morvani Federation will seek a different path while the politicians debated. The prisoners near Jupiter lived their strange captivity. The human supply ships came every day, bringing food that was carefully selected to match each species' dietary needs. Medical teams treated the wounded with technology that surpassed anything on the council vessels, and the human crews who delivered these supplies always stopped to talk. Commander Ireel of the Denari found herself in conversation with a young human named Sophia. The girl was barely an adult by human standards, assigned to the supply shuttle as part of her training. She asked real questions about Denari culture, about their home world, about their families. She seemed genuinely curious. Why are you being so kind to us? Elle finally asked. We came to destroy your planet, Sophia thought about the question. My grandmother survived the last war, the one that almost ended our species. She told me stories about it, the hatred, the revenge, the endless cycle of violence. Sophia paused. She said the only way to break the cycle was to refuse to continue it. Even when you have the power to hurt someone, you choose not to. But we are your enemies. You are our enemies, Sophia corrected. Now you are just people far from home waiting to see your families again. There's no reason to make that harder than it has to be. Air did not know how to respond. In her entire military career, she had never encountered an enemy who thought this way. The Denari had conquered worlds. They had crushed rebellions with brutal efficiency. They had never shown mercy to the defeated because mercy was weakness, or so she had always believed. Aboard the Eternal Dominion, Admiral Vorov spent long hours alone in his quarters. The meeting with Admiral Chen had shaken something loose inside him. He kept replaying her words in his mind. Mercy is strength, the greatest strength there is. He had commanded fleets for 60 years. He had destroyed worlds that refused to submit. He had ordered executions of rebels and criminals without hesitation. That was what power meant. That was what leadership required, or so he had always believed. But the humans had more power than anyone. Their weapons could crack planets. Their technology was generations ahead of the Council. They could have exterminated the invasion fleet down to the last ship. Instead, they had offered surrender terms that were almost embarrassingly generous. Message arrived from the Krellian home world. High Commander Trell demanded that Vorath prepare his surviving ships for a breakout attempt. They would fight their way through the human blockade, escape the Sol system, and Clear's throat, bring intelligence back for the next invasion. Vorath read the message 3 times, then he deleted it. He called for Lieutenant Park and asked to speak with Admiral Chen again. The second meeting took place in the same conference room. Chen looked tired, dark. Circles had formed under her eyes and her movements were slower than before. She had been awake for days, managing the aftermath of a battle she had never wanted to fight. You asked to see me. Ambassador, she said, I received orders from my government. They want me to attempt an escape. Chen nodded. We detected the transmission. We assumed something like this would happen. I am not going to follow those orders. Something shifted in Chen's expression. Surprise, perhaps, or hope, may I ask? Why? Vor struggled to find the words. Because I am starting to understand what you showed me. My entire life I believed that power meant domination, that the strong must crush the weak to survive, but you have shown me something different. He paused. You could dominate us, you choose not to, and somehow that makes you stronger, not weaker. Chen leaned back in her chair. That realization took my species thousands of years and billions of lives. You are doing better than we did. I want to help, Vor said. I want to convince the Council to accept peace, but I do not know how. The Krellians will never forgive this defeat. They will spend decades building a new fleet. They will come back. Yes, Chen agreed. They probably will. Then what hope is there? Chen smiled, that tired, sad smile. The same hope there has always been. Ambassador, the hope that people can change. The hope that understanding can defeat fear. The hope that even the most stubborn hearts can learn to choose something better. She leaned forward. You changed, didn't you? In the span of a few days, you went from wanting to destroy us to wanting to help us. If you can change, perhaps others can too. The High Command will execute me for treason, perhaps, or perhaps you will inspire others. We cannot know the future, Ambassador. We can only choose what we do in the present. Vor sat in silence for a long moment. Then he made a decision that would have seemed impossible a week ago. I will address my fleet. I will tell them what I have seen. Here I will give them a choice. Those who wish to return home and continue the war may do so. Those who wish to stay and help build peace may stay. And you, I will stay. The words felt strange in his mouth, but also right. I have served the Krellian Dominion my entire life. I have followed orders without question. But I have never been proud of what I was ordered to do. Perhaps it is time to serve something else. Chen stood and extended her hand. This time Vorath took it without hesitation. Welcome to the side of peace, Ambassador. I hope you will find it suits you. The address to the fleet was broadcast on every channel. Vor stood on the bridge of the Eternal Dominion, his gray face filling view screens across 1,000 ships. He told them about his meetings with Admiral Chen. He told them about human mercy, human strength, human hope. He told them that everything they had been taught about power and conquest was wrong. I am not ordering you to join me, he concluded. I have no authority to give such orders. I am simply telling you what I have learned and asking you to think about it. Those who wish to return home may do so. The humans have agreed to release any ship that wants to leave, but know this: if you go home to rebuild the war, you will be fighting against everything I now believe in, and you will lose, not because humanity will destroy you, but because hatred always destroys itself in the end. The silence after his speech lasted several minutes. Then the responses began to come in. Morvani's ships declared their intention to stay and seek alliance with Earth. All of them without exception. The Denari fleet was split, roughly half choosing to leave and half choosing to remain. The VA collective ships left, immediately unwilling to participate. What they saw as surrender, and the Krellian vessels of the 800 Krellian ships that had survived the battle. 600 chose to leave. They jumped out of the system as soon as the humans deactivated the interference fields, racing home to report Vorath's treachery. But 200 the ships that chose to stay were brought to Earth orbit. For most of the alien crews, it was their first view of the human home world. They had studied images and sensor readings. Before the invasion, they had seen the blue oceans, the green continents, the swirling white clouds, but nothing had prepared them for seeing it with their own eyes. Commander Eel pressed her face against the viewport of her quarters. Earth hung in the darkness like a jewel, beautiful and fragile. This was the world they had come to conquer. This was the home of the species that had shown them mercy. It is smaller than I expected, said her first officer, standing beside her. Size is not everything, Iriel replied. Our home world is larger. Our ships were more numerous, and yet here we are, guests of the species we try to destroy. The humans arranged tour for the alien visitors. Small groups were shuttled down to the surface, accompanied by guides who answered every question with patience. The aliens saw human cities, vast and crowded and loud. They saw human farms stretching across green valleys. They saw human children playing in parks, unaware that enemies from the stars were watching them. Former Admiral Vor was given a special tour. Admiral Chen herself accompanied him, walking through the streets of a city called Geneva. It was an old city by human standards, with buildings made of stone and glass filled with monuments to events Vor did not understand. This is where the first world government was formed, Chen explained. After the Third War, the survivors decided that nations could no longer be trusted to govern themselves. They created a unified government to prevent future conflicts. One government for an entire planet, Vor asked. That seems impossible. It was difficult. There were rebellions, resistance movements, entire regions that refused to participate. It took generations before everyone accepted the new order. Chen paused beside a statue of a human in simple clothes, hands raised toward the sky. But we learned that cooperation was possible, that enemies could become friends, that the cycle of violence could be broken. My species has never learned this lesson. We have been conquering other worlds for 10,000 years. Domination is all we know. Chen looked at him with compassion. Then, perhaps it is time to learn something. No, they visited a museum dedicated to human history. Vor walked through exhibits showing the full scope of human violence, wars that killed millions, weapons that could poison entire continents, ideologies that demanded the extermination of entire groups. It was horrifying, and yet the humans displayed it openly without shame or excuse. Why do you show this to outsiders? Vor asked. It makes your species look barbaric, because we refuse to forget. Chen answered. Every atrocity in this museum taught us something. We built our civilization on the graves of our worst impulses. If we hide our history, we risk repeating it. Vor studied an image of a ruined city, skeletal buildings reaching toward a gray sky. The caption identified it as Hiroshima, destroyed by one of the first nuclear weapons. Thousands of humans had died in an instant, thousands more had died slowly, poisoned by radiation, and yet you rebuilt, he said softly. We always rebuild, that is what humans do. We fall, and we get back up. We make terrible mistakes and we learn from them. We hurt each other and then we find ways to heal. Chen stood beside him looking at the same image. We are not a perfect species, ambassador. We never will be. But we are a species that tries to be better. In another part of the museum, Commander Eel discovered an exhibit about human psychology. A guide explained the concept of trauma, how terrible experiences could damage the human mind, and how humans had developed methods to heal that damage. You deliberately try to repair damaged minds, Iril asked, confused. On Drenner, we consider psychological damage to be weakness. Those who suffer are removed from service. Removed, you mean executed. Sometimes, more often, they are simply abandoned, left to fend for themselves. The human guide looked horrified. That seems cruel. It is efficient. Resources spent on the damaged are resources wasted. But even as Ural said the words, she felt doubt. The humans spent enormous resources on their damaged members. They built hospitals, trained specialists, developed medicines and therapies, and yet they had become the strongest species in the galaxy. Perhaps efficiency was not the highest value. After all, the alien crews spent 3 weeks on Earth. They toured cities and farms, mountains and oceans. They attended concerts and sporting events. They ate strange foods and heard strange music. And slowly, almost without noticing, they began to see humanity differently. Lieutenant Commander Voss of the Krellian Dominion found himself in a small town in a region called Japan. His guide was an elderly human woman named Tanaka, whose family had lived in the area for generations. She showed him temples that were thousands of years old, gardens designed to create feelings of peace, and schools where children learn not just facts but values. What values do you teach? Voss asked. Respect for others, responsibility for your actions, the importance of harmony. Tanaka smiled, and the understanding that all living things are connected. What harms one harms all. On Krella we teach that the strong must dominate the weak. That power is the only thing that matters. And has that teaching made your people happy? Voss did not know how to answer. Happiness was not a concept the Krellian Dominion valued. Strength, yes. Victory, certainly, but happiness, that was for weaker species. Yet as he watched human children playing in a schoolyard, laughing and chasing each other without fear, he felt something strange, a longing for something he had never experienced, a sense that perhaps there was more to life than domination. At the end of the 3 weeks, Admiral Chen called a meeting of all the alien commanders. They gathered in a conference center in the city of New York. Hundreds of officers from a dozen species sitting in chairs designed for human bodies but modified for alien comfort. Chen stood before them looking out at faces that had once belonged to enemies. You have seen our world, she began. You have seen our history, our culture, our people. I hope you understand now why we fight so hard to protect it. Not because we believe we are superior to you, but because we believe that what we have built is worth protecting. She paused, letting the words settle. Some of you will return to Your home worlds, you will tell your governments what you saw here, perhaps. They will listen, perhaps they will not. But I want you to carry one message. Above all others, her voice grew. Stronger humanity does not want war. We never wanted war. We built our defenses because we knew that someday someone would come to destroy us, but our greatest hope has always been that those defenses would never be needed, that we could find a way to live in peace with our galactic neighbors. She looked at Voreth, who sat in the front row. Some of you have already chosen to stay, to work with us toward that peace. We welcome you. We do not ask you to betray your species or your cultures. We only ask you to help us find a better path. Then she looked at the rest of the audience. For those of you who choose to leave, we wish you well. We will not stop you. We will not ask you to spy for us or sabotage your governments. Go home, live your lives, and remember what you saw here. Remember that humans are not monsters. Remember that we offered you kindness when we could have offered you death. The meeting ended. Some officers left immediately, eager to return to their home worlds. Others lingered, talking among themselves, processing what they had experienced. And some approached Voreth, asking how they could help. By the end of the day, the number of aliens who chose to stay had doubled. 200 ships became 400. Crews from 7 species pledged themselves to the cause of peace. It was still a small number compared to the vastness of the galactic community, but it was growing. Commander Eel found herself standing beside Vor as the sun set over New York. The human city glittered with lights, millions of people going about their lives, unaware of the aliens watching them from above. Do you think we can change things? Iriel asked. The council has ruled for 10,000 years. Our species have been at war for longer than human civilization has existed. Can any of this really make a difference? Voreth considered the question. A month ago he would have laughed at the idea, but a month ago he had been a different person. I do not know, he admitted, but I have learned something from the humans. They do not ask whether something will succeed before they try. They simply try. They fail and they try again. They keep trying until they succeed or until trying is no longer possible. He turned to look at Iriel, his black eyes reflecting the city lights. We may fail. The council may crush this movement before it begins, but at least we will have tried, and perhaps that is enough. Iriel thought about his words, then she nodded slowly. Perhaps it is. Below them, the city continued to shine. Humans walked the streets, laughed with friends, held their children close. They did not know that their future was being decided in orbit above them. They did not know that aliens who had come to destroy them were now working to protect them. But perhaps that was the most human thing of all, to live in hope even when the future was uncertain, to build families and communities and civilizations even when enemies lurked in the darkness, to believe that tomorrow could be better than today. The aliens were beginning to learn this lesson, and slowly, one heart at a time, the galaxy was begin. 6 months after the failed invasion, Earth hosted a gathering unlike anything in galactic history. Ships arrived from across the stars, not for war but for conversation. The old Galactic Council of 12 had collapsed. 3 of its founding species had fallen into civil war. The Krellian Dominion, once the most powerful force in the galaxy, was tearing itself apart as Factions fought over the future, the new. Gathering was smaller but more hopeful. Representatives came from the Thesari, who had formally apologized for their abstention and requested friendship. The Morvani Federation sent a full diplomatic mission, eager to establish an alliance that would protect them from future aggression, and scattered among these familiar faces were newcomers, 17 species who had once been subjects of the Council, now reaching out to the humans who had proven that empires could fall. The meeting took place in Geneva, in the same building where the first human world government had been formed. Admiral Chen stood at the podium, looking out at a sea of alien faces. Beside her sat former Admiral Vorath, now Ambassador Vorath, representing those who had chosen to break from their governments and seek a new path. Thank you for coming, Chen began. 6 months ago, your governments voted to destroy us. Today you sit in our capital as honored guests. This change would have seemed impossible a year ago, and yet here we are. She paused, letting the weight of the moment settle over the room. I will not pretend that the path ahead is easy. The Krellian remnant fleet is rebuilding. Other species are watching to see what happens next. Some believe that humanity's mercy was weakness, that we can still be conquered if enough force is applied. They are wrong, but they will not learn this lesson easily. She looked at the assembled representatives with steady eyes. That is why we have gathered you here, not to form a new empire, not to demand submission or tribute, but to offer something the old council never could: genuine partnership. The audience stirred. Partnership was not a concept that fit easily into galactic politics. For 10,000 years, the council had operated on principles of domination and hierarchy. The strong ruled the weak. Treaties were signed under threat of force. Alliance meant submission to a greater power. We propose a different model, Chen continued, a community of equals where every species has a voice, where disputes are settled through negotiation, not war, where the strong protect the weak instead of exploiting them. She smiled slightly. Humans have tried this before among ourselves. It took us centuries to make it work. We made terrible mistakes along the way, but we learned that cooperation is stronger than competition, that empires fall but friendships endure. Ambassador Vorath rose to speak. His gray skin had changed in the months since the battle. The harshness had softened. His black eyes held something they had never held before: hope. I spent 60 years serving the Krellian Dominion, he said. I believed in its principles. I believed that strength meant domination, that mercy meant weakness, that the only security came from crushing all potential threats. I was wrong. He looked at Admiral Chen with respect that bordered on reverence. The humans could have destroyed us. They had every right. We came to enslave their children, to burn their cities, to erase their civilization. Instead, they offered us food and medicine. Clear's throat. They showed us their history, their culture, their hopes. They taught us that power can be used to heal instead of harm. His voice grew stronger. I am not asking you to forget what the Krellians have done. We have caused great suffering across the galaxy. We must answer for our crimes, but I am asking you to believe that change is possible. If I can change, if my crew can change, then perhaps entire species can change as well. But the Thesari. Ambassador Yin stood next, her skin shifting through shades of hopeful blue. The SAR abstained from the invasion. Vote, we believed we were being neutral. Staying above the conflict, we were. Wrong, neutrality in the face of. Injustice is complicity, we allowed this. Attack to happen when we could have. Prevented it, she bowed toward Admiral. Chen, the SAR formally apologizes for our failure. We request the honor of joining this new community, not as observers, but as active participants. We will contribute our resources, our technology, and our diplomatic experience to building the peace that should have existed all along. One by one, other representatives rose to speak. The Morvani pledged their trading fleets to the new alliance. The Finari offered their agricultural expertise to help feed developing worlds. Species that had been enemies for millennia stood together and declared their intention to try something different. Not everyone was convinced. Some representatives remained silent, watching with skeptical eyes. Others walked out, unwilling to participate. What they saw as weakness, the galaxy, would not change overnight, but something had shifted. A seed had been planted that at the end of the formal session, Admiral Chen made one final announcement. Humanity will share its technology with any species that joins this community, not as payment for loyalty, but as a gift. The defensive systems that destroyed the invasion fleet will be made available to anyone who asks. No one should have to live in fear of conquest. No one should have to watch the sky and wonder if death is coming. A Morvani delegate raised one of his forearms. Why would you give away such power? You could rule the galaxy. With this technology, you could become exactly what the council was. Chen nodded as if she had expected the question. We could, and that is precisely why we will not. Power corrupts when it is hoarded. Safety shared is safety multiplied. If every species in this room has the ability to defend itself, then no empire can rise to dominate the others. We will all be equals, not because we are equally weak, but because we are equally strong. The implications rippled through the audience. This was not alliance. This was not treaty. This was something new. A genuine sharing of power freely given, without expectation of return. No species in galactic history had ever done such a thing. 3 months later, the first joint patrol launched from Earth orbit. The ship was crewed by humans, the Sari, Morvani, and former Krellians who had renounced their government. Its hull bore symbols from all for species and painted across its bow in 12 languages was a phrase that would come to define the new era. We remember, we forgive, we protect. The patrol's mission was simple: travel to the outer regions of known space, respond to distress signals, and demonstrate that the new community was real. They would not conquer, they would not demand, they would simply help and let their actions speak louder than any words. Their first encounter came near small colony on the edge of dreary space. Pirates had blockaded the planet, demanding tribute in exchange for allowing food shipments through. The joint patrol arrived to find 6 pirate vessels holding an entire world hostage. The pirates were Denari themselves, renegades who had fled their home. World civil war. They did not recognize the strange ship that emerged from Jumpbase, its hull painted with unfamiliar symbols. They assumed it was another victim. They were wrong. The patrol ship broadcast a simple message: release the blockade and surrender your vessels. You will be given fair trials on your home world, or continue your actions and face the consequences. The pirates laughed. They fired on the patrol ship, confident in their numbers. Their weapons splashed harmlessly against shields that should not have existed on a vessel that size. Then the patrol ship returned fire once, precisely destroying the lead pirates' engines without killing the crew. We do not wish to harm you, the message continued, but we will not allow you to harm others. This is your final warning. The remaining pirates surrendered within minutes. They were taken into custody. Their ship secured, the blockade broken. The colony below watched in stunned silence as food shipments resumed and medical teams descended to help the sick and injured. Within a week, the story had spread across a dozen systems. A new power had risen, one that used its strength to protect the weak instead of exploiting them. Other species began to ask questions. Could this be real? Could the galaxy actually change? On Earth, Admiral Chen received daily reports of progress and setbacks. Some species joined the new community eagerly. Others remained suspicious, waiting to see if humanity's words matched its actions. The Krellian remnant continued to rebuild, their leaders promising vengeance. War was not over. It might never be truly over, but something had changed. For the first time in 10,000 years, hope was stronger than fear. Chen stood at her office window, looking out at the city below. The sun was setting, painting the sky shades of orange and gold. Children played in the parks. Couples walked hand in hand along the river. Life continued as it always did, resilient and beautiful. Vorith entered the office and stood beside her. He had changed in the months since the battle. The coldness had left his face. His posture was different, less aggressive, more contemplative. He looked like someone who had found something worth living. For the Krellians will come again, he said quietly. They cannot accept what has happened. Their entire civilization was built on the principle of domination. If they cannot dominate, they cannot exist. Chen nodded. I know. We have been preparing since the day you surrendered. Will you show them mercy again? If we can.